Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Enzo Valente. I'm the director of the Italian University and Education and Research Network in Italy, GAR. And it's my duty to give you the welcome to the annual conference of Terena. We are very glad to host this conference in this nice place you already appreciated, probably. Sicily is in the middle of the Mediterranean, and it's very well placed with a number of other countries. We would like to be in closer contact in our future. The sea and the ocean are the items of this opening of this conference. Claudio Allocchio will help us with a number of technicalities which are not technicalities, very complicated because of the presentation we are going to give.
Let us make a commission again.
Yeah.
For a while.
So we'll have in this session, this opening session, we have a welcome from the Ministry of Education, University and Research, the head of the Office for Information System, Mr. Maurizio Binacchi, and then another welcome presentation a short presentation from Professor Migneco, Professor of the University of Catania, and also Director of the INFN, the National Institute for High Energy Physics in Italy, INFN, and also Director of a big project in the Mediterranean. And then we move to the opening presentation of Professor John Delaney from University of Washington. So I'd like to give the floor to Maurizio Binacchi for his welcome.
Hello, good evening. Sorry. My name is Maurizio Binacchi. As Mr. Enzo Valente has told you, I work for the Ministry of Education. I have only 10 minutes, so I will be very fast. Just to let you know, what does Ministry of Education in Italy? We manage the school, we manage the education, but we manage even the administration of them. So with the schools, we need to get in touch to get from them administrative news, administrative information. But even we want to make an exchange with them about all the learning that they must do at school. 1 year ago, we decided to move from our connections. Yes, 1 year and a half, I don't remember very well, but doesn't matter. We decided to move from the organization that in Italy manage all the connections for the public administration, that's called RUPA, and we moved to GAR. Why? Because GAR is an organization that was of the Ministry of University and Research before they did join the two ministries, Education and University. At that point, GAR was an organization, let me say, owned by the ministry. So we decided to move. Why I want to put the accent on this? That we did it despite the law, because in Italy the law says that all the public administration must use RUPA. So we decided to do it. In 1 year we moved from having a BGA from 180 till 340, and we did it without any interaction. So I'm not here to say how beautiful is GAR, blah, 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 but it is. You're welcome. Some numbers. We did it with our offices. We have just begun to do it on our school. School in Italy means 43,000 of buildings. So 43,000 of connections. It's a very big word. We have just begun with the first 1,000. Why? because all the schools have our connection. It's for the administrative news information, and they pay on their own the part for the didactic. So we said, why it must be paid two at least connections? Let's make one of them, and let's do something better. So we have just begun with the first 1,000, and we have plenty of projects. First of all, we want to connect all the schools, all the buildings, let me say, because of course one school may own many buildings. So we want to connect all the buildings, and we want to connect we want to do services on these connections. We want to do e-learning, we want to do video conferencing, all these services that can be done on connections. I know that you are, let me say, it's not only Sicily in the middle of Mediterranean. Italy is in the middle of the world. That's more important. So, if all the other companies, I don't know how to say, societies, companies, the NRAN all over the world could manage to connect all the schools of their countries, we can hope, it's a dream, like someone else had a dream, we can connect all the schools all together. This would be very, very beautiful. Thank you very much. Have a good work.
May I invite now Professor Migneco, who has probably a couple of slides also to present. I don't know if they are ready.
You see them? I don't want to.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Emilio Migneco, and I'm very glad to welcome you in Catania for this conference on behalf of INFN. You may know that our institute, INFN, pays the highest attention to the development of the network, scientific network. And this simply because the efficiency and the development of this network are essential for our program. We cannot perform, we cannot realize our program without a network for research as powerful as possible. This is obviously true for all the collaboration we have with the United States, different laboratories. It's also true for the program we are carrying on at CERN and in other European laboratories. But it is also true for a new project the INFN has put in his roadmap for the next future. About this new project, as an example, I will try to take a few minutes of your time to describe a little bit more in detail. So, we have already intended. Yes, you know, this project is called NEMO. It is at the moment the major project we have at our lab. And this is also one of the major projects that INFN has in his roadmap for the next decade, let's say. The idea is to realize a neutrino telescope of the size of a cubic kilometer to detect high-energy neutrino coming from the cosmos. Why neutrinos are so important and interesting to open a new window of observation in the cosmos. And this depends from the peculiar properties of this particle. Neutrino, as you may know, is almost massless, has no charge, suffer only the weak interaction, and therefore it can travel intergalactic distance without any interaction, no deflection, no absorption with the infrared background, the microwave background, or any material which is intergalactic material, let's say. And therefore, in a sense, it is an ideal probe to study the far universe, to go beyond the horizon, that is a limited horizon, that is connected with other probes like electromagnetic probes or hadron probes. So in principle, for the same reason that make neutrinos so interesting as a probe, they are very difficult to be detected because they do not interact. And therefore, to hope to have a chance to detect some of these particles coming from the cosmos, you need an enormous detector, just of the size of cubic kilometer. And obviously, you cannot put such a large detector inside the mountain in an underground laboratory, as usually we do. And the only solution is to put it in underwater or under ice. And in fact, there are two major projects. At least the community think to need two of these telescopes to cover the full sky. One of them is already in construction at South Pole by a collaboration led by the United States, and the other one should be constructed in the northern hemisphere in the Mediterranean Sea. Here, as INFN, there are at least three collaborations working in the Mediterranean Sea. The INFN, the NEMO project, is one of these. We are going on with an advanced R&D project to verify and validate the technological solution and to find the ideal site for the location of this telescope. You can imagine, as a picture view, this telescope of a kind of grid made of 6,000 photomultiplier, 6,000 optical sensor, organized on structures which are tensioned by buoyancy and connected with the electro-optical cable to the shore. At the moment we have started and we are going to complete in the next months what we call the NEMO Phase 1. That is, we have realized offshore of Catania at a site, 2,000 meter depth, with a 25-kilometer cable and two terminations. In one of these terminations, the National Institute of Geophysics and Volcanology has located a station for the monitoring, online monitoring of the seismic event and, generally speaking, environmental parameters. And in the other termination, we are working with this R&D for the validation of the major component of the cubic kilometer telescope. The phase 2 is the location of the infrastructure in the site. We have a candidate for the installation of the cubic kilometer detector, which is southeast of Capo Passero, 3,500 meter depth, 100 kilometers from the shore. There we will going to install, we already bought it, a cable of 100 kilometers with fibers and power up to 50 kilowatt. And we are constructing at the shore a laboratory, a small laboratory. This is another view of the same story from the bottom, let's say. In front of Catania, at 2,000 meters, we have the test site, the phase 1, and in a very large plain offshore of Capo Passero, 3,500 meters, we will install the infrastructure for the cubic kilometer, and first we install a full tower, and then more, and then we hope that the collaboration, the European collaboration, we are trying to construct together with other collaboration in France, in Greece, in Netherlands, and so on and so forth. We hope that they can choose this site as the final site for the telescope. So you can imagine you have this net of this grid of sensor. The neutrino passing can be converted in a charged particle called the muon, and this particle, it has a path, a range of kilometer or 10 kilometers, emit a stream of light that interacts with the sensor, and the time sequence of the signal allows you to the construction of the original direction of the neutrino with the precision of 1/10 of a degree. Now the situation is the following. In Catania we are relatively well connected with the rest of the world. You have the GAR network and so on and so forth. But NEMO will land and will transfer a stream of data, the order of a few hundred gigabit per second, till Capopassero. From there on, we have no many more connection. And therefore, an essential aspect of this project, an essential development is the realization of a connection between Catania and Capopassero. In this case, the stream of data can be transferred to the rest of the world, and in different labs you can operate your fine analysis searching for rare events of scientific interest. And therefore, I hope that our chairman, with this tremendous push, will help us in the realization of this connection, which is an essential part of the game. So near Capopassero in Noto, there is another radio observatory by this CNR. So it's a region that I think needs an installation of a suited scientific network connection. So I hope you will forgive me for this short advertising, but I think it was on a good occasion to inform the people about this new development, and take the occasion again to wish you a good stay in Catania, great time at this conference, and I hope the weather will continue to help you in have the best and enjoyable time in Catania. Thank you very much.
So the deep sea seems to be the new area for science to be explored, and indeed this is a demonstration that science expects more and more support from communication and transmission technology. I mean, exploring the unknown world of undersea and under the ocean is probably more challenging than exploring the space. But I mean, now that the world of the research is expanding everywhere, of course, I mean, we all are involved in communication, transmission technology. We are talking about the fibers going here to there, but some applications like the application under the sea with the detectors like the one detector like the one illustrated by Professor Migneco, or even more advanced research in the field of volcanology. I mean, which is the Earth is composed also by ocean, and then I mean I welcome the presentation of John Delane, who is the director of Neptune project, which just started, and this is a very challenging project, and John is leading this project because of his long experience in the field of oceanography, but also with other disciplines related to that, even if he passed the most part of his time in making cruises over the sea. I mean, yeah. Of course, cruises over the sea are important just to understand what is the ocean. So now, I mean, his presentation, I'm sure it will be very nice because he can show us what can be done, how technology is also able to provide us to explore these new worlds. Please, John.
Thank you. Is that, can you hear in the back? Thank you very much, Dr. Valenti. I appreciate your your introduction very much. What I would like to do, you can start. What I'd like to do initially is share with you, if we could dim the lights just a little bit, take the lights down. I wanted to share with you a little bit some high-definition video from under the sea at about 2.3 kilometers depth. Last summer, we used a robot vehicle with a high-definition camera at a depth of about 1.5 miles or 2.5 kilometers. And this is in fact the kind of imagery that we were able to receive. And I think it's important to share this with you. And what I'll do as I talk through a little bit of it is to hope that you can see it. We will make it available to those who can use it through Carol and through Terena, so that it can be used by many, many people for education and things of that sort. But it's important to realize that one of the things we study on the seafloor is submarine hydrothermal systems, as you see here. And in fact, what I just showed you was an octopus that lives in this area, and it is the principal predator. It's the dominant predator in the area. Can you move the slider bar to 5 minutes? So I'm going to take you quickly through it. It's about 25 minutes of video, which I cannot show all of it, but I just wanted to open with a little bit of this, and then we'll move through it, and I'll show you a couple things that are pretty exciting to me. Yes? Okay. Okay. So what you're seeing is for those of you that haven't seen this before, is the black smoker. It's 360-degree fluid, which is coming from below the sea floor. I'll show you diagrams about this in a minute. But we're seeing the edge of the manipulator arm here. And that looks like I'm getting a little feedback, so I'll get away from the speakers here. I think if you just, what I did earlier was just simply move it all the way to 5 minutes. It's at 4 here, see? You take it to 5 minutes. And then just move it. You can just move it quickly, and it'll jump. Here, this is basically it. Here we go. Okay, just do that. Okay, now what you're seeing here. And if you just pull it next in about 1 minute, pull it to 11 minutes. What you're seeing here then is a cluster of tube worms that's living around these hydrothermal systems. And what happens in these hydrothermal systems is that there is no sunlight below a depth of about 500 meters, but there's a lot of chemical energy that's coming out of the volcano. And so the chemical energy is used in a form called chemosynthesis as opposed to photosynthesis, as a way for microbes to make a living. And what you're seeing is great detail here. Those tubes are about the diameter of your thumb, And what you're seeing here in the middle now, the middle of the screen, is a large black smoker, and you can see that these tube worms live very close to 350 degrees centigrade fluid. So let's go to 11. So we're going to jump to 11 here. Now, you'll see again, it's a different kind of tube worms. These tube worms are more healthy, and the camera, of course, is moving around. Here you see a cluster, sort of like a candelabra, if you like, of black smokers. And these are like weeds. They're like weeds in the forest floor. They grow and they fall down, they grow and they fall down, they grow and they fall down. Let's go to 11. Oh, no, to 15 and a half. Great. Okay, now you're seeing some of the reddest of the tube worms. These are the most healthy ones, and we'll go in fairly close on some of these. Now, some of these are on pillars that are as much as 20, 25 meters tall, and they have been formed as a result of the hot water jetting out of the sea floor, driven by the volcanic heat below. So that's one of the reasons I'm so excited to have come to this conference and to have been invited to come here, because tomorrow I will go to your volcano here and spend a day getting in touch with the woman who lives inside the volcano. I understand that volcanoes are all feminine. So we can slide forward just about a half a minute, I think. One more. There we go. Now this will be the last that I'll show you, but to give you an idea of what I'll be talking about, we have the ability to bring this from the seafloor through networks like Terrena. We can bring this kind of imagery from the seafloor live to you any time of the day or night, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, for decades. And it is with this kind of material we can do research, because you can see the material so clearly. We can also do the kind of teaching that I think is going to be extremely important. So what I'll do now, with your indulgence, if we take the lights up slightly, and we'll just start off with. That's what I'll start. Okay, so are we projecting that now? Okay, great. So I can take that over then in advance. Now, before I get directly into that, I wanted to bring to your attention that the technical group that helped us produce this live transmission, it was last September, this live transmission from the seafloor via satellite to the University of Washington in Seattle, and then across the world to audiences all over the world, was the Research Channel, which is a group that it's an international consortium of nearly 30 research universities and institutions. They are leaders in innovative HD TV over IP networks, and they have very low latency interaction for their interactivity. It also distributes satellite cable television news about science to about 22 homes in the United States. Anyway, I just wanted to let you know that the Research Channel was an essential group. Their technical capabilities were what we really needed. So what I now want to share with you is something about where we are going in the world of oceanography. We will go beyond ships and satellites, which is what we have been using, and we will move into a new world of a different kind of science, and that's what I'm here to share with you. Because we're being hosted by folks in Italy, I thought I would try. This is probably embarrassing. Oltre la nave di satelliti, come studieremo gli oceani in futuro. It's the best I can do for now. There are some basic points that I want to make. Very simple, very basic points. The first is that the oceans are, in fact, essential to the quality of life on Earth. I will try to demonstrate that to you during my talk. The second thing is I want to make sure that you realize, and folks live as close to the ocean as you do in Sicily and in Italy and perhaps much of Europe, is that they are mysterious still. They are dangerous, as we've proven in the last year and a half with both tsunamis and big hurricanes. They are unexplored. Less than about 5% of the ocean has truly been explored. So you could think of them as the last physical frontier on the planet Earth. We must understand the processes that are in the ocean basins if we are to understand the ecosystem that we are part of. And I'll try to make that connection for you, but it's very clear. The good news is, the very good news is, that there are bold new approaches to studying the oceans, and that those new approaches will, over the next 2 to 4 decades, revolutionize the way we perceive our planet, and they will allow us eventually to manage the entire planet. And that's asking a lot. I want to remind everyone that often active researchers, those of us who go to sea, those of us who climb into volcanoes, those of us who go to other planets, it's about what we don't know. We're going out to find out something new. For most of the rest of the society, it's about what we do know and how we can use what we do know to either educate or to build new kinds of systems or instruments and things of that sort. And there's a feedback loop, a very important feedback loop that's important societally, and that is that discoveries in basic sciences lead to new kinds of technologies, and new kinds of technologies basically are used for discoveries, and that's the loop that we hope we're in. So just to remind you about the planetary oceans, I wanted to share with you a few key points. It covers nearly 70% of the planetary surface, and it is a huge reservoir of both heat and chemicals. I'm talking about the planetary scale ocean here. And in a sense, I don't know how to translate this. Maybe you can help me. It functions as the flywheel of planetary climate. What would you say? Volano.
Yes.
It's the volano of the planetary climate. It absorbs half the carbon generated by fossil fuel conversion as we burn oil. And it's the ultimate repository of human waste. It generates hazards, as we know. And it touches most nations and all continents. And if you remember, there was a period in every country's evolution where water law, the law of who has control of the water upstream compared to who has control downstream, and then further downstream, and then further downstream. And the law is very rigid about that, because whatever is done upstream affects everybody downstream. So you have to be very careful, and the law is very firm. Well, in the ocean, on a planetary scale ocean, all nations are touched by the ocean, or all continents are touched by the ocean. We are all downstream from one another and from ourselves, because the ocean and the atmosphere circulate on timescales well within the human experience. So the challenge, the ultimate challenge of how we approach the oceans, has a great deal to do with optimizing the benefits and mitigating the risks that are implicit to life on a dynamic planet that's driven by only two major processes. Only two. Solar energy drives the system you see here, and internal energy drives the system that you see here. And what happens on the surface of the planet is very much a function of the balance between those two. The internal heat kicks up mountains over geologic time, and the solar the solar energy and the rain erodes the mountains. So it's always a dynamic balance between the two. And that is nowhere more true than it is in the oceans. But the oceans, although they seem simple, are incredibly complicated, incredibly difficult to understand, because the processes that operate within the oceans are myriad, many, many processes. But it's also the interactions between the atmosphere and the oceans and the continents, or the other Earth processes. So I'm going to take this picture now and I'm going to scan it downward into the Earth, but look at all the processes that we're trying to capture. All of them interact with one another. This is a very, very difficult, complex system. We need computational sciences, we need grid computing, we need networking covering the planet in order to bring as many minds as possible to bear on the system that actually is made up of the ocean. And it belongs to all of us. People claim the part that's near their continents or near their countries, but the fact is the ocean clearly belongs to all of mankind. So if we look at the part that's driven by solar energy, take a look at this video, look carefully at it, and you'll see in blue and red the sea surface temperature, and it's cycling from 1982 to 1998. The sea surface temperature along the equator, you can see the El Nino cycle. It's when it gets very bright red and then very, very deep blue. On continents, you can see vegetation index, and it's proportional to the growth, the bright green, and the dieback, the olive green or the brown, the dieback of plants. It's important now. Notice that the rhythm of what happens on the continents is partly set by the oceans. And if you need to prove this to yourself, not only are you looking at annual cycles here, but if you need to prove it to yourself, choose your favorite continent, and realize if you live in the middle of a continent, you're still directly affected by the oceans, because the weather moves in the form of atmosphere, moves across the continents in days. And the weather is set by the interaction between the atmosphere and the oceans. All right? Now, if you do one more thing and you realize that the growth of food on the continents is a subset, it's a portion of the growth of vegetation on the continents, and mostly we eat food from the continents. Humans don't eat that much food from the oceans, although here, of course, you do. So a large amount of the food that is grown in mid-continent is tuned to the rhythms of the ocean, and we don't understand the oceans very well. So this connection between the oceans and the continents and human beings is a very, very important one. Unless and until we understand how the oceans function, we'll have a hard time predicting when major excursions take place. The second thing I want to show you is the Pacific itself, and this is a much more complex. I told you that the ocean was very, very complex. This is more complex, but we're still looking at the sea surface temperature. The bright red is warm water, and the blue is cold water. And this took a huge computer a long time to calculate this process. And what you're going to see here then is, let's see if I can get it. Oh, I guess I can't get my laser working. Do you have a laser pointer? No, I guess not. Well, I'll describe it because I can't point to one or the other. As you look at the equator, you'll see this lovely pattern of eddies as the water along the equator moves to the western Pacific. And then periodically the water movement to the Pacific, which is normal, breaks up and you see it's an El Nino year. And across the bottom you can see the timeline continuing. It goes from basically, I think it's 93 to 2004. So let me show you that again, if I can. Oh, I think I've lost. Oh, thanks. I'm sorry. I can only think with one hand. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. Just to emphasize how this is one variable at the scale of the ocean. What we're interested in is something like 60 or 70 variables in the ocean throughout the volume of the ocean as it interacts with the overlying atmosphere and with the underlying rocks. We'll move on, but I just remember that complexity. For example, one of the things the ocean does is it buffers the atmosphere with regard to CO2. During giant storms, when waves are breaking, their bubbles form, the atmosphere is incorporated into the ocean in tiny bubbles. If there's more CO2 in the bubble than there is soluble in the water, or there's enough CO2 in the bubble, then the CO2 will diffuse across the edge of the bubble into the water. Once that happens, in the springtime, when the sunlight comes up again, then all that carbon is used to create phytoplankton. So there's this exchange that we depend on. And it's very simple, and it's very exciting in a sense, and it uses a biological pump in the ocean. When the phytoplankton grow, then they're eaten by the zooplankton. Zooplankton are eaten by larger fish. So the water, or the CO2 goes in and out of the ocean. In fact, you could say, if you want to be sort of vaguely poetic about it, the ocean breathes CO2 in and out. It comes in the high latitudes, and it sometimes goes out along the equator. This is what humans are doing. We're adding an interesting wrinkle in that we are consuming a lot of CO2, and we're decimating a lot of the land growth, and we're changing the input to the ocean. And many of you have seen this. We're running a one-sided experiment, if you like to think of it that way, a one-sided experiment of putting CO2 into the ocean. Well, the good news, you could say, is that, well, about half of the CO2 created by human beings burning fossil fuels is actually going into the oceans. The bad news is that it's changing the pH of the oceans, which is changing the stability of the carbonate, which is what drops to the seafloor, removing the CO2 from the near surface environment. So we're kind of, with changing the pH, we may be plugging up the ocean. I'm not here as saying that we're all doomed. I'm here to say we must understand the ocean because it's our friend, it should be, and it's very, very complicated the way it works. Now let's look at the bottom of the ocean and see how it behaves as a result of the internal heat. Looking at, well, let me go back here for a second. You see the little, right at the top of the two arrows there, you can see where there's a little magma chamber, molten rock, collects right at the bottom of at the top of the oceanic crust, And the plates spread apart away from that. It looks like a carrot. It spreads away from that at about the speed your fingernails grow. Well, that's where the oceanic crust is created, and this is a close-up view of it, and you can see the magma generation, and it collects in that little puddle, and then the water of the ocean circulates down through the porous crust, interacts with the molten rock, gets very hot, and then comes jetting back up to the surface, and what you see there is black smoke. Here is what the pattern looks like globally. In the oceans, the youngest rocks are represented here by the warm colors, the red. And then slightly older, slightly older. So the seafloor is continuously being formed in the ocean. It's spreading laterally, and then it subducts beneath the continents. So the ocean basins are only about 200 million years old, whereas the continents have rocks on them that are as old as 4 billion years. Now, let's look at the plates. So I haven't changed anything. I'll go back. Let's look at the plates compared to the ocean. The Earth is covered with tectonic plates. Let's look at how they are registered on this figure, very slowly. So where the spreading comes apart is at the edge of the plates. Well, what does that look like? Well, let's take a trip. We'll do something that you probably haven't done before. This is a 1 gigabyte video clip, and it allows us to fly. We strip the water out of the oceans, and we're going to fly around the oceans. Now, we're just about to pass over the top. That hole in the Earth, by the way, is the hole in the data, not in the Earth. And you see, we're going through Iceland, and now we're going south along the Atlantic, and we're just about to pass the Azores. As we move further south, we go almost to the equator. You can see the Canaries on the left, Africa. And then we come right about here is where the equator is. And we're going down the longest mountain range on the planet, and it is also a 70,000 kilometer long volcano that is constantly being pulled apart by plate tectonics. This is a global feature. It is a feature we didn't know much about before the Second World War. We didn't even know it existed. And over the past 40 or 50 years, we've begun to find a great deal out about it, and I'll share some of that with you. Here we are in the Indian Ocean. That's a triple junction there, and then we'll move over into the southeast Indian Ocean, where there are almost no seamounts. You'll notice that. Why? We have no answer to that. We don't know why. In the Pacific, there's so many seamounts, and in the southeast Indian Ocean, there aren't. It's really quite fascinating. Now, we're going past Australia on the left, coming up into the Pacific Antarctic Ridge, and then these big transform faults here, these big shifts in the ridge are as much as 1,000 kilometers. Now you see we're into more seamounts. And as we move north, we move along the ridge, and I'll show those of you here. You see how sharp the ridge is right there. It's that line. That's where the spreading is. It's really pretty fascinating. And to dive into this area is even more fascinating. Let's look closely at a cross-section of what we think it looks like. There's one. We look at it even closer, and there's what happens right on the seafloor. I've been there many times in a submarine. And now I'm going to take you down there by using the mapping that we have done. And I'm going to take you all the way down until you can almost see the seafloor. And then I'll introduce you to Neptune. Sort of. This is a higher resolution. This is a 5-meter grid. So we've mapped the seafloor to a resolution of 5 meters, which means there'd be 20, 50 pixels in this room, perhaps. We go deeper, and it's even higher resolution. This is 1 meter resolution. We did this with a robot that was not in touch with the ship, and now we can fly through the data using a program called Fledermaus, which was created by folks at the University of New Hampshire, Larry Mayer and his colleagues. And we'll fly further into the data. And if I had the right sequence here, we could flip over to a video clip which would show you exactly what the seafloor looks like there. I'll try to show you that in just a minute. There's Neptune. That's kind of a joke. I want to emphasize, however, that this is a very dynamic science, this ocean science, and we're now in the middle of a major, major period of discovery. And this period of discovery is extremely important for you to realize. We're changing the way we look at planets. In the last 10 years, we've come to the realization by looking at erupting underwater volcanoes, going there a week, months, sometimes as much as a year later, we see things like this. Massive amounts of microbial material are issuing from below the seafloor up into the overlying ocean, and this lasts for months. Many, many thousands, many hundreds of thousands of tons of material comes out in the vicinity of where a volcano has erupted. And it's polysaccharides, but it's mostly microbes that actually live at temperatures close to 80, 90, 100 degrees centigrade. So it's really pretty fascinating. Here's what some of them look like. So these, the ones you're seeing here, are the ones that came out of the seafloor at a particular time that we were studying it roughly 1998. But in 11 out of 11 cases, every time we've been to the seafloor to look at an erupting system, we see microbes coming from below the seafloor. So we reached the conclusion that microbial biosphere of heat-loving microbes lives below the seafloor in the pores and the cracks of the rocks. And it largely lives off volcanic gas. And we know almost nothing about it. Not only that, we don't even know how to explore it. How do you get below the seafloor and wander around? We're not good at that yet. We may never be. But if we go back and look at the far right side here, let's see, your left, your left, over in the large box on the left there, right where the world is, you see where the plate plunges beneath the continent? Let's look in detail at that. That is a place where the big earthquakes on the planet, where the magnitude 9 earthquakes take place. You can see the red zone on the plate is called the locked zone. The locked zone happens when the plate quits moving, although over at the ridge it's still coming apart, but it quits subducting, and it stops for 100 years or 200 years. And then all of a sudden, very sudden, it happens to move, and that's what creates the magnitude 9 earthquakes. The last time this happened near Seattle was on January 29th, 1700. We know that because the tsunami that left the Seattle area wound up on the shores of Japan, and they recorded it, and they were able to track back from the trajectories of the incoming tsunami to show where it had come from. The other interesting thing is, right above the red part of the plate, there's some gray material that looks like brain matter. Well, that's sediment. Sediment is being scraped off the tectonic plate and is being accumulated as if the continent were a snowplow moving across the plate, although it's not. The continent's sitting there and the plate's going beneath. That sediment is shown here on the right-hand side of the picture, I guess your left-hand side, is flat-lying sediments, which are coming from the plate. And then the sediments are being compressed and compacted, and the water that's in them is being squeezed out. But the water that's in them has a lot of carbon in it, and the carbon is acted upon by the microbes that live in the sediments and in the water. And when that methane that they produce comes to the surface in the water, it freezes. It freezes in something called methane hydrate or gas hydrate. Now, why would I tell you this arcane bit of information? It makes no sense to sit here talking about frozen ice that nobody ever sees because it's a kilometer down. Well, here's why. Some of the researchers at Geomar in Germany have handed me these pictures. We've seen these ourselves on the seafloor, but they have the best pictures. And here's what you can do with it. You can light it and it burns. It produces, it's basically a natural gas, if you like, and it basically produces water and CO2 when it burns. Why even is that interesting? Because the amount in green is almost twice as much as the known reserves that we now have of coal, gas, and petroleum. So this is a potential resource that is on the continental slope that is fairly deep, that we don't know very much about, and almost all developed nations that I'm aware of have a program to examine the potential utility of this material. And it's very hard to study because it volatilizes you. If I brought in a block, put it here, tomorrow you came in, it would be gone because it would volatilize. It's not stable at this high temperature and at this low pressure. So studying it by bringing it back isn't the way to study it. We need to study it in its environment. So there are major questions that we need to ask here. And I'm not going to go into the details here, but if you like, believe me, if you really want to, I will talk with any of you forever, especially if it's in a bar, I will talk to you about any one of these questions, and I have about 45 more, so I'll talk as long as you will about these questions. But a couple of them are important. One of them is, do we have a way of establishing what the health of the oceans is? And can we check it? You wouldn't think twice about going to the doctor's office. In fact, you expect the doctor to take your blood pressure, and sometimes, once a year, they probably take a blood sample. Well, the Earth is our mother. We should keep track of how healthy she is. Is there a way we can do this? Right now, there's no easy way to get to the health. The second question is, are there critical tipping points where the health of the ocean might flip somewhere where we go into another cycle that's very different? For example, over the past 40,000 years, there have been a number of ice ages. Well, believe me, if we went into an ice age, it would certainly affect almost everybody except those people that play hockey. You know, we would have a problem because it would be a very different climate that we would live in. There's a last one I want to point out, and all of them are important, but this one here, how does the newly discovered deep-sea submarine hydrothermal system that supports these microbes, where does it come from? How does it get there? How important is it, and what are the societal benefits? I'll come back to that in a bit. But I want to talk for a brief shining moment here about how outside of oceanography there are major things taking place, some of which you folks know better than I. One of them, of course, is that it's very difficult to predict the future. And I don't know if you folks know anything about the New York Yankees, but Yogi Berra was sort of a philosopher catcher, and he admitted that it's hard to predict the future. Moore's Law is something you folks know a great deal more about than I do, and I'm not going to even presume to lecture on it, except that it is still Moore's Law. It is still not a linear growth, it's an exponential growth. Metcalfe's Law is exactly what you folks do. It's networking. And in fact, Metcalfe pointed out that the usefulness of a network is proportional to the square of the number of users. Well, in 1993, there were about 2.5 million people using the internet. By 1997, there were 10 times that, and now there's probably close to 3 billion. The IT revolution, wireless and fiber, are fundamentally, within our lifetimes, actually within about a decade and a half, are fundamentally changing the way we function, the way we interact, the way we communicate, and they're affecting the way we will do oceanography and how we will communicate oceanography as well. The son of Moore's Law, called by Richard Dawkins, is that the cost and the timing required to sequence a base pair for genomic studies is decreasing exponentially. Why do you care about that? Well, it's another one of these technological processes that's moving non-linearly, and as all the non-linear changes take place, we have a non-linear capacity to interact with the oceans and the Earth in general and other planets eventually that we didn't have even 2 decades ago. So it's a fundamental change. It's important that we all be aware of it at some level. The information is very clear here, so I'm going to let you read it. I'm sure most of you read better than I do, but the bottom line is that as we get these new capabilities, it allows us to ask questions that we couldn't even ask before. Not only who's there, but what are they doing and to whom? And how do they react to changes in pH, for example? Here's the best example. Everyone knows what a nonlinear curve looks like. Well, the one about sequencing base pairs is shown here, and it's very clear that the price in yellow is going down, and the number per month is going up rather dramatically. In less than 8 years, it's gone from a couple 100,000 to 3 billion. That's nonlinear in anybody's book. So the reciprocal of Moore's Law is kind of a joke. That's my term, and I've never heard anybody refer to it as that way. But as a component size decreases, the same computational power can be extracted from a smaller and smaller unit. Everyone knows that, but we will be using small, very small, sometimes nano robots that will be able to do things that we can't even imagine now. They'll be able to assemble materials and regenerate materials and do all kinds of things. We aren't using that in the oceans right now, but we will be. So all these conspire to produce a situation in which you could say, as Marcel Proust said, that it's not about necessarily new terrain. It may be about having new eyes. And the best example that I can come up with is a picture that hopefully demonstrates this point to you. I'll come to it in a minute. You'll get the picture in a minute. I've changed the sequence here. The question then is, why are we changing our approach to science in the oceans? Well, one of the reasons is that ships and satellites have given us the ability to ask questions that we can no longer answer. We can't answer the questions we have now because we don't have the tools to answer them using ships and satellites. And here's the best example I can think of oceanography is at the very early stages of development. We are the kid. We are the kid trying to look below the sea, the water level to see what's there. Eventually we want to go there and be there. Well, the second reason that we want to change is because it's societally important. Everyone now, I hope, realizes that the quality of life wherever you live on the planet is tied somehow to this metronome or this flywheel that controls the planetary climate and, to some extent, long-term weather. Very important. Finally, the one I've just mentioned are the technological changes. So I'm not going to repeat that, but all these technological variables or communities are changing rapidly, and we're going to incorporate all of them into the kinds of science that we will do. So the need, here's one of the things to think about. First, some of the processes that operate in the ocean most effectively are the ones that create big events, but they happen very rapidly, like an erupting underwater volcano or a gigantic storm, and we can't predict them necessarily, and we can't track them very easily because we schedule ships 2 years in advance, and sometimes airplanes aren't available, and airplanes don't go below sea level anyway, normally. And so we have a hard time tracking these big energetic events. The second point is that there are longer-term processes, very slow-changing things that we have to have the information about because those may be related to this tipping point business I was telling you about. Finally, what the program that we're talking about here is going to do is take the evolving technologies and build us an entire new approach to the science. And here's what I'm here basically to share with you is that the NSF, National Science Foundation, has put together a program which they call Orion, and it's to explore the time domain. And the OOI is the Ocean Observatory Network, which we will hardwire directly into your network. And what we do under the ocean for the next 5 decades will be directly accessible to anyone who can log onto the internet. So this OOI-Orion relationship is shown here. The funding will come from Orion, and the President of the United States, in his budget submitted to Congress this year, had something close to $300 million identified for this program, and we're hoping that that will stay in the budget. There's a great fight going on in Washington, D.C. over the budget. It happens every year, but we're hoping that that will remain, and it will start in 2007. So the vision here is to enable, through networking, Terrena and other networks, like Canary, Internet 2, to enable routine, real-time, remote interactions between thousands and thousands, or land-based user communities and thousands of in-situ submarine sensors that will be robotic systems that can be deployed to follow a particular event. And the goal, obviously, is to detect, to respond to quantify, and model, ultimately to understand all the processes that operate within the ocean. What's important for networkers to understand is that the key word here is interactivity. Interactivity is the heart and soul. Hopefully what we'll be able to deliver to you is the capacity, if you have instruments on this network, or you are teaching a course and you have gotten someone to pay for instruments that are out there, you can have control over those instruments within limits. You can have control. You can change the frequency that they sample. Maybe you have your own robot which can move through the area. It can download power from the grid because we're going to deliver a lot of power. So that's what we're headed for. That's the goal. There are 3 components to this ocean observatory activity. One of them is global. One of them is, here's what the global system might look like, and this is what the distribution of the components would be. Another is coastal, and it's mostly around North America. We're working closely with the Canadians on this. An expanded network of coastal observatories, most of which exist already. And that network will consist of many, many installations that are near shore to do science that's related to fisheries, to science that's related to pollution, science related to sediment transport, all kinds of things. And this is what the coastal portion of the United States looks like, and many of you see this type of thing, but we will be looking at these as generalizable processes. And then there's Neptune, my favorite, Northeast Pacific time series undersea networked experiments. It is going to be the regional cabled observatory, I hope, for this program. We will have to compete for it, but we will certainly compete. And remember what I showed you about the plates? Well, the red plate, just to help you identify the one that we're going to choose, to turn into a natural laboratory. The red plate is called the Juan de Fuca plate, and we are going to home in on it rather sharply and rather in a focused manner, and we'll look at the sea floor, we'll look at the overlying ocean, we'll look at the way the atmosphere and the ocean interact, and we'll look at how the ocean interacts with the crust. And lest you think that this might be something in which it's a little bit as exciting as watching the grass grow, it's actually better than that, because if earthquakes are one of the examples of what happens in the ocean, then here's 2 years' worth of earthquakes on the Juan de Fuca plate. There'll be plenty of things for us to watch. This is also in the ocean. This shows the currents in the area, and the red box is where this regional cable observatory will be located. It'll be called Neptune, I hope. And it'll be plate scale. The sort of light brown color there is the Juan de Fuca plate. It'll have 2,000 miles of fiber optic cable associated with it. It'll have a series of submarine laboratories. We'll build them differently. Each one of them will be a different kind of laboratory depending on the scientists who are involved and what it is they want to do. Here's an example on a volcano, an underwater volcano called Axial Seamount. And it's about 30 kilometers from one end to the other of that diagram. Obviously, the instruments are sort of a little out of proportion to the size. Here's another one right in the continental slope looking at how sediment travels off the edge of the continent. This is what we will do in terms of connectivity. We will have the entire plate on the left, on the west, let's see, on your left, the west coast of the United States will be hardwired into the internet. We'll deliver 100 kilowatts of power along the cable. There'll be a copper conductor, and we will have close to 10 gigabit per second transmission on all the fibers that will reach as many as 20 different nodes. And we'll be able to run robots, autonomous vehicles and robots around by controlling them from land in response to what we perceive happening. So this is a big change. This is another example of a robot this is called a glider. It's built by Charlie Erickson of the University of Washington. And finally, it will last about 30 years. That's the lifetime. We're calculating the lifetime on it, and it will be adaptable and expandable in one form or another. Here's another example of the kind of dynamic image you would see off the west coast. This is a satellite image, integrated satellite image, September 2, 1999, I think, and it's the sea surface temperature again. Notice right along the coast, it's a little colder along the coast. That's upwelling taking place on the coast. That's very, very important to the huge fishing industry that is in this area. So there's a lot of reasons to study. It's not just plate tectonics, and it's not just ocean science. This is the newest version. It's been put together by my colleague Deborah Kelly at the University of Washington, and it involves Neptune Canada, the loop to the north. The Canadians are in the process of building that. It'll go live in 2007, 2008. And the one below, the other loop, is going to be built by the Ocean Observatory Initiative, funded by NSF, and it will go live in about 2010, 2011. It takes a long time to do these. We first started thinking about this in 1991. We got serious about it in about 1994, 95, got our first funding in 1996, and it took a while, it took quite a long time to get this thing going. And I hope the young folks out there, remember, this is going to be accessible to anybody. It goes to the internet. It doesn't go to people with American passports. This is a research tool and an educational tool. We hope it will be used by researchers and scientists and educators all across the world, because our goal is to turn it into something like the Hubble telescope, to look deeper into the cosmos. This is a sort of a Zen approach to oceanography. We're looking inward at our own ocean so that we can go to other planets where there are oceans and find life. I'll come back to that in just a minute. So this is the current configuration, and it's basically one of the powerful, powerful approaches that we think we can take to oceanography. This will be the first of its kind. It won't be the last, though many countries are interested in doing this. There's a program called ISONET within the European Union that's actually developing similar kinds of things. But the difference is that this network is not to find oil. It's not to measure temperature so we can feed information to lobster fishermen. It's not for any practical purpose that is immediate return. It's for research. It's for education. It's to find out how the ocean works. It's to find out the questions to the answers we don't even know how to ask yet. We will, the wiring diagram for where the information can go, if you were in North America, looks like this. That big red pipe is called National Lambda Rail. It's terabit communications. And this is what we look like right now. It's probably going to get better within the next 8 years, 6 to 8 years. By the time we come online, we hope we can put information from Neptune into 4 billion households around the world. In terms of networking and the cyber infrastructure that's going to be necessary, we have some real challenges for computer folks, very serious challenges. One of the things we want to do, if you start in the lower left-hand corner of that diagram, is we want to have knowledge acquisition. Knowledge acquisition requires that we have a good feeling for how good the data is. We'd have to verify, validate the data. Once we see that something is taking place that we need to know about, more about, and we have the robots that we can move around, we have to go through a decision analysis. So the computer system, the grid that's actually running this program, will have all the data available. It'll compare what it's measuring at any particular time on any part of the net. It'll determine whether that's what we've seen before or what we haven't seen before. If it's what we haven't seen before and it looks like a valid measurement, it interrogates the nearby nodes, seeing if there's anything else going on nearby. Once it's determined that there's an event taking place, then we affirm that, we build a hypothesis, and then we begin making a decision to act, and we deploy vehicles into the area to take more samples or to look more closely at the system. All of this handled in cyberspace without a human being at every link. We can't afford, frankly, to have human beings at every link. So if you come back to the combination of these two, that a new set of eyes is the heart and soul of where we're going, and we are just at the early stages of oceanography, then we can push the envelope. I'm not sure what the right word is. It's kind of a cultural thing, I suppose, in the U.S., but we're thinking outside the box. What things can we do that we couldn't do before? Well, one of them is, are we alone? If there's a deep, hot biosphere on Earth where volcanoes interact with an overlying ocean, might there be something similar in the solar system or beyond? Well, just as Galileo played a role in 1610 with his paper called Starry Messenger, these 4 satellites of Jupiter are liable to play another role, another fundamental role in the evolution of how we think about ourselves and the world around us. Io is the most volcanically active body in the solar system. It's erupting continuously. Since we've discovered it, it's probably been erupting continuously for the last 4 billion years. It's a fairly dried, sulfur-rich body, but its nearest neighbor is not dry. It's actually covered with water. It's water ice. And you could say it's not a very nice place to live, and it's true. The surface temperature of this body is about minus 170 degrees centigrade, and it's a vacuum. And that's not the worst part. If you put an astronaut there, the people from NASA have told me that the astronaut would probably die from radiation before they froze to death in the vacuum. So it's a hard place to live. But below the surface is probably a liquid ocean. There's underwater volcanoes, most likely, and it's very similar, we think, to what we have, what I've been showing you earlier. So this is a likely place for us to look for life. And by designing innovative strategies to look at the way volcanoes and earthquakes interact with life on this planet, we find out a lot about our own planet. But at the same time, for the same investment, we're basically learning how to explore other planets for life. At least one of the ways to explore other planets for life. A second point, a new kind of robot. This is a robot that would be very, very powerful. It's being developed at Woods Hole. It could go something like, it can go for 30 to 50 hours without any control at all. You simply program it, put it over the side, let it go to the seafloor, and it does whatever you tell it to do, and then it comes back at the end of 50 hours and signals you and says, I'm tired, my battery's about to run out, take me back on board, I need a charge. And it dumps all its data. That's how I got that really high-quality map that I showed you. I worked with colleagues from Woods Hole and my colleagues at the University of Washington, and we produced a really dynamite map of the seafloor using this robot, which nobody was operating. It was on its own. Bill Gates, I don't know if you've heard of Bill Gates. He's one of the two people that started Microsoft. Anyway, Bill Gates gave a talk last November to the supercomputing conference in Seattle, and he talked about the future of computing. He talked about the way in which technical computing is liable to evolve, and he really gave an excellent talk. He had about 26 slides, and among his slides were the way that computational sciences will move us into a new era. I think, bottom line, I suspect that he would like to have a supercomputer on everyone's desk, probably with, I don't know, software written by Microsoft, perhaps. But of the 25 slides that he used, and you can find them at that website on the bottom, 11 of them referred to Neptune as an example of where scientific inquiry is going to drive technical computing. I would urge you to take a look at it. You can also download his lecture. Now, I worked with colleagues Ginger Armbrust and Deirdre Meldrum on a new breaking field. It's called ecogenomics as a result of the Human Genome Project. The capacity to, you saw earlier, the nonlinear change in our ability to sequence spaced pairs, or sequence a genome. If we have a cable and we have little factories on the seafloor that can do this, and they don't have to be very big, we think, because we do it very effectively in the lab, 5 to 10 years from now, we'll have something where an event takes place. It's in green, but it could be an erupting volcano, it could be a giant storm, it could be anything that happens in the ocean that changes who's living there and what they're doing. And the data comes from these systems being turned on from your laboratory, and they begin generating genomic information, which is then sent back to fiber, and you have a three-dimensional, actually four-dimensional picture of how the ocean is changing in terms of its physics, its chemistry, and its biology. This would be an entirely new capability. We're very excited about this. Some people, however, won't believe in remote analyses. They believe only in their own laboratories, and so we have to have ways of autonomous sample recovery. So here is shown a little airplane at the top with no pilot. It's just trolling. At the bottom, there is an autonomous vehicle. Erupting volcano, the vehicle flies through the cloud, takes a sample of the microbes that an hour before were 2 kilometers below the sea floor. They're being expelled by the eruption. Takes the sample, ejects the sample to the surface, and the plane picks it up and brings it back. So within 24 hours, we have microbes no one's ever seen before from 2 kilometers below the seafloor that are in the lab being analyzed in nearly, not quite real time. Finally, just to give you a sense of the kind of thing I do when I'm at sea, we had a program a couple of years ago where we asked this question: what are the limits to life in these hydrothermal systems? And so we took pictures. We took this group portrait of a deep sea hydrothermal system. This is about 65 meters from one side to the other, and the pinnacles are about 24 meters high. And we went in looking at the interior at about 300 degrees centigrade. The red part here is about 300 degrees centigrade. The outer portion is about 2 degrees centigrade. That's cold seawater. Figuring somewhere in the wall of that structure, there would have to be a limit. We don't think life lives at 350 degrees. We don't think it does. So we decided, well, first of all, what we'll do is we'll pick up a piece that's about 2-3 meters high and about 1.5 meters diameter. We come from the Pacific Northwest, where we do a lot of logging, so we've laid out a careful plan where we would wear suspenders and be like loggers, and we had used a chainsaw. We really did use a chainsaw. I'll show you. So we had 2 ships and a robot called Ropos. We worked also with a robot, Jason from Woods Hole, and we put in the yellow basket at the bottom, we put 2 miles of high test line. If you fish, you know what fishing line has a breaking strength. Well, this has a breaking strength of 60,000 pounds. That's roughly 28,000 kilos. So what we did was, here, well, let me show you. This is from a documentary that both NOVA and BBC put together. And we put a cage down, and then we used the robot hand to pull a logging cable tight around this. We pulled 2 logging cables tight around it. And then we did use the chainsaw. This is really what we did. And we cut halfway through the structure. And then we released the flotation, which brought this, we connected this heavy line, and it's neutrally buoyant. This line is made out of high molecular weight carbon fiber. And we brought up 13,000 pounds of rock, which was still steaming when it came on board, and the microbiologists immediately started sampling it and started culturing what they had. And out of it, we found the highest temperature microbe that's ever been found. 121 degrees centigrade was cultured in the laboratory. What was really surprising was that, but the second thing is what happened when we went back 3 days later. We were completely surprised by finding that the chimney had grown back. The mineralization from the high temperature fluid had regrown the chimney. So we think there's a lot of dynamic activity on the sea floor. Finally, what science is about is discovery. I talked about discovery in the beginning, and it's about discovery for us, and it's about opening the door to our most precious resource, which is our children. Henry David Thoreau says we don't always know how far and widely or how near and narrowly we are to look. And I want to mention to you that something like this would be an incredible teaching moment. Let me turn it so you are the teacher here, right? This is a teachable moment. Watch what this crab does. She's carrying an egg case. Watch what she does. There are little antennules that she extends down, and she reaches up with her mandibles and she cleans them off. So if you put that in front of kids, they can be 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, and just let them talk about what they think is going on. It's really pretty fascinating. It's a good experiment to try. On the other end of the spectrum, looking at sperm whales and the way they behave with respect to one another in the ocean, in the natural environment, is another thing we would have accessible to us. We would have cameras that would be on non-intrusive robots, which would just sort of hang out with them. And you would be amazed at how these animals behave. They're really very, very gentle. Very, very, and well, there's not much more you can say. We'd also find out how they die. This is another whale, and it just quit living somewhere along the way and landed on the bottom and has become a place where tube worms grow also. So we need to give our children a chance to take a risk. And sometimes children just don't quite get the laws of physics, but they have mental experiments they'd like to run. I like to think of this as my son when he was, say 7 or 8 years old, laying fiber optic cable through through the cosmos. But we could turn it into a gaming industry as well. Real-time data coming back in real time from fascinating places could become the basis for a gaming industry. So here are the take-home points, the ones I started with. The oceans are central to life on Earth. We must understand them if we're going to understand the distribution of hazards the resources that are there, and basically local and planetary scale ecosystems. I have a suite of collaborators that I would like to thank, and it's impossible, as you all know, you probably have many, many yourselves, it's impossible to thank them all. There have been a huge number of folks that have been involved in helping move down this path. The final thing I'd like to say then is really very simple, and that is that we have to keep probing the unknown because there's not much known about what's left to be discovered. And the reason that I find this so fascinating is that T.S. Eliot, the great poet, received the Nobel Prize for Poetry in 1948, and he mused in the four quartets, he mused in the following way, speaking, I hope, for the human race. We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. Arrive through the unknown remembered gate, where the last of earth left to discover is that which was the beginning. At the source of the longest river, the voice of a hidden waterfall, not known because not looked for, but heard, half heard, in the stillness between two waves of the sea. Thank you so much. I deeply appreciate it.
Thank you very much, John, to that. I mean, we learned a lot of things, including the fact that we have to work a lot in networking matters. So if there are some comments or questions to John, we have a few minutes, probably. There are mics over there. I don't know if even people from outside we are in video conference. We got some message that somebody said from Holland, from other sides, that the transmission was excellent and very good quality. So we reproduced the good quality you have shown over there. So it's.
Yeah, what happened to me once before was that somebody called in and said that I had misquoted T.S. Eliot, and it's true. But I'm not going to tell you where. Surely someone there has a question. Thank you.
Yeah. Case has got a question over there.
Oh, here.
Over there.
Who's this?
Oh, do you have a mic?
John, thank you. Tim Marshall, UKERNA.
Wow.
I think to those of us who are not scientists, the presentation we've just seen has been truly captivating and engaging. Having a 16-year-old son at the moment who's trying to decide between the arts and the sciences and the issue we have about having enough scientists coming through, I'm sure that if we could use this sort of material to evangelize, there would be a much greater interest in science by young people thinking of which way they would go. John, I wanted to ask you about how, while you've said this is available, the sort of proactive measures that might be used in order to help people see that science actually has some really quite interesting and engaging aspects to it.
Thank you, Tim. I will be happy to wrestle with the problem because what you posed is not as straightforward. There's no simple answer, I think. One thing I think we could begin producing would be, well, let me frame my answer in that I believe that these kinds of things that we're presenting here will become much more common. There will be many places around the planet and ultimately within the solar system where real-time data will come streaming back and groups like you will help distribute it to the world at large. That being said, Neptune will be, I hope, in the vanguard of that approach. But I believe we will then soon begin creating an entire new job characteristic, which is, call them scientific interpreters. They'll be, imagine having a CNN for science where in fact something's going on all the time, probably many things going on in many places all the time, and we will need entire communities of scientific interpreters. Well, a scientific interpreter that simply says, oh, well, that's a picture of Pyrococcus furiosus and they are conducting or they're engaged in thermophilic bacterial activity, that doesn't reach the public. So these educators, these folks who would be at the interface between science and the world that pays for it, basically, could have a different kind of education. They could have an education where they could understand the science at an appropriate level, but also understand the culture that they're speaking to. And I think having a rooted educational background in all aspects of the culture is exactly what it's about. I mean, science is just one variant on our culture. Art is another variant. Unfortunately, war is a third. But there are many aspects to this question you've asked, Tim, and I don't think there's a simple answer, but I think it's going to belong to people who are willing to do it. It's really that simple. And I assure you that we have made a policy for this program that we're putting together, and the policy says that with the exception of something that might threaten national security, all of the data will be made available as quickly as possible, you know, with some latency and some maybe probably jitter, things. It'll take us a while to learn exactly how to do this. But this is for science. It's for education. It is not for some research into some corporate thing that's going to make a lot of profit. This is what we want to find out about how the planet works.
Hi, John. This is Kees de Laat, University of Amsterdam. I have a question I'm puzzling with since the beginning of your talk. You showed these worms in the beginning, yeah, and you made a remark from some that you said these are looking healthy and these are not so healthy. Now, I know for a fact that if I was looking like that, I would be unhealthy. But what makes you define which kind of these worms in this very strange environment you have never seen before, who is healthy and who is not healthy?
Can you run that other? Just
The film back
Just,
here?
yeah.
Yeah.
That's a really good question. Does anyone else have a better question, one that I can answer? What we have observed is that when the tube worms, it's interpretive, but when the tube worms are sort of brownish, the shell, the chitin, the tube itself is brownish. It looks like they're older. It looks like the fluid flow through the environment is waning. It looks like they're not growing as fast, and it looks like they're basically not so healthy. And a number of those wind up being, we see them later when there are no tube worms living in them at all, and they're the same color brown. So I have made that interpretation. I can't root it in anything. But I can tell you for sure that you can tell the healthy ones. When you see the healthy ones, they're in the middle of a significant flow. So you can actually see the shimmering water coming by, and they're fat, they're plump, they have smiles on their faces. But thank you for the question. I'll try to find out what the real answer is, and since it's a network, I can write an email to all of you. Somebody ask a question I can answer now, please. Yeah.
Thanks for your talk. I'm Hervé Perrault. I'm working in the Commission.
Your name?
Hervé Perrault. I'm working in the Commission on research infrastructures. And I was amazed by the quality of the research. The question is, how many scientists from different disciplines are working for you or should work?
With, not for. With. Very important difference.
Because really we are pushing on multidisciplinarity, and very often we find out that some scientists like to work within themselves and not to open to other communities. And it seems that here your talk is really pleading for multidisciplinarity.
Pleading is one term. What we would like to do is empower human beings in general, and some of them might be loners and would be able to log onto the internet in their closet with nobody around, download the data they want in order to think about the problem they want. But it could also be the other way around. And in fact, the research programs we're putting together have to be multidisciplinary because the questions we're asking require more than just your simple country geologist. You got to have a geophysicist, you got to have a chemist, you got to have a microbiologist. In fact, I will tell you, one of the experiments that we have been trying to do is something that, in fact, when we first started talking about it, almost everybody laughed about it. And it was to look at the plate tectonic processes that drive these kinds of systems and the earthquakes and the volcanoes that are associated with them. We suspected that no one knew how much life entered the ocean from the bottom, how much heat from these things, because nobody's ever been there. Nobody's been there during an eruption. We get there afterwards, and we see the place looks like it's been sort of changed, dramatically changed. And on the seafloor, except for volcanoes killing the tube worms where the lava flows directly over, on the seafloor, the volcanic activity is a source of joy. It's a source of, not joy, it's a source of life. I'm equating joy to life. But so the proposal we put in was to look at the tectonic plate for the next 10 years, measuring all the processes that take place all around the tectonic plate, look at the earthquake activity, look at the eruption activity, look at the chemical exchanges, the fluid coming out, the heat coming out, and the chemicals and the biology coming out, and quantify the entire process. Well, that's going to take 50 people to do that, all of them different backgrounds. So there's opportunity for both. I mean, some of the most creative parts of the human race reside in an individual head. So we want to make, the capacity of an individual to make a breakthrough insight is something we want to empower. The capacity of groups to do new kinds of research is something we'd like to empower. It's a good question. I will indeed, yes. I will do that, yes. Thank you. With permission? I would like to mention that on Thursday, at what time, Carol? At 9 o'clock on Thursday, the chief engineer that helped us do this was Michael Wellings. Many of you may know him. He's sorry he can't be here at this conference. He's with the Research Channel and the TV, University of Washington TV station. Michael was central, and his crew were absolutely central to us being able to do this. I will tell you that had we not had their support, we could not have done it. We were at sea for 3 weeks before we tried this, and there were about 9 different cases where something went almost completely out of control, and one way or another, we got it back under control. So it took us a long time to transmit these images live, a long time. And with fiber laid on the seafloor, this should be a 24-hour thing, and Michael will be a key player in helping get that signal to you folks, believe me. So Michael will be talking at 9 o'clock on Thursday from Seattle.
Midnight.
Midnight. Which is midnight in there.
Yes, I will not see him talk.
Okay, if there are no more questions, I want to thank again John. Very stimulating presentation indeed for a number of things. So now we will continue with the 4 parallel sessions, and after the coffee break, and I want to say, if you have some problem with the local area network and communication to outside, please refer to technical people. I mean, also the video conference and video streaming, until now it's okay, and we hope we continue. We welcome other people outside Catania, very far from here, to follow the conference. I don't know if all the sessions can be followed, all of them, so everybody is able to do. Thank you very much, and see you in half an hour.